A world ruled by giants until one species stole fire. The human species that hunted giants with fire.
Long before cities, before words, before history itself, there was fire. And there was a creature that learned how to control it. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't an animal anymore either. It was called Homo erectus, and 1 million years ago, it discovered how to hunt monsters. Mammoths, giant hyenas, saber-toothed cats. Creatures 10 times its size. Stronger, faster, built to kill. But this new species had something none of them did. Light. For the first time in history, the hunted became the hunter. This is the story of the human species that hunted giants with fire. The world they inherited was brutal. A planet of predators. Africa was alive with monsters. Herds of elephants twice the size of modern ones. Giant buffalo, towering ostriches, and saber-toothed cats lurking in the shadows. Europe and Asia weren't safer. There were mammoths as tall as houses, cave bears that could crush a skull with one strike, and hyenas the size of lions. For millions of years, early humans had lived at the bottom of this food chain, scavengers picking at leftovers, sleeping in trees, praying to see sunrise. They had brains, yes, but no claws, no fangs, no armor. And then, somewhere in the East African savanna, something extraordinary happened. They learned to steal fire from the sky. No one knows how it began. Maybe a lightning strike ignited a grassland. Maybe a volcanic spark lit a fallen tree. But Homo erectus watched, and it didn't run. While other animals fled from flame, they approached it, cautiously, curious. They felt the heat. They saw the way predators stayed away, and they realized this was power. At first, they simply carried burning branches, keeping the fire alive through the night. Then they learned how to feed it, protect it, use it. Over generations, it became their shield, their tool, their first real weapon. Fire was no longer just a force of nature. It belonged to them. Before fire, night meant death. When the sun set, predators ruled. Eyes glowed in the dark. Lions, hyenas, leopards. The night screamed with hunger. But when Homo erectus learned to keep the fire burning, the balance shifted. Flame meant light. Light meant safety. For the first time in history, a species could look into the darkness and not be afraid. They slept beside embers instead of in trees. They cooked food, unlocking energy no other animal could access. And with that energy came evolution. Bigger brains, longer endurance, sharper minds. They weren't prey anymore. They were becoming something new. Fire didn't just warm them, it changed them. Fire was more than defense. It became a weapon. Homo erectus learned to use it the way wolves use teeth. They carried torches into the grasslands, setting small fires to corral herds of animals. Imagine a group of hunters, barefoot, silent, shadows against the flame, herding massive elephants into natural traps, driving them toward cliffs or swamps, then finishing the kill with stone-tipped spears. No single hunter could face a mammoth, but fire made them a pack. Predators feared them, prey fled from them, and wherever they went, the land burned. This wasn't hunting anymore. It was warfare. The Ice Age was coming. Cold winds swept across continents, forcing animals to migrate in search of warmth. And behind them, always following, was Homo erectus, armed with spears and fire. In Europe, they faced the massive, straight-tusked elephants. In Asia, gigantic rhinoceroses. In Africa, lions larger than modern ones. Every battle was uneven. A single swipe from a mammoth could crush a skull. A single bite from a saber-tooth could end a lineage. But they fought anyway. They used terrain, smoke, and fear itself. Predators rely on darkness, but now the darkness betrayed them. Fire blinded their eyes, scattered their packs. And so, slowly, the hunters of old gave way. The giants began to fall. Around the campfires, something else was evolving. Language, or the beginnings of it. Gestures, sounds, shared plans. Fire made that possible. It gave them time to sit together, to communicate, to imagine. Their brains grew larger. from 800 cubic centimeters to over 1,000 in just a few 100,000 years. The spark outside had ignited one inside. Firelight reflected in their eyes as they planned tomorrow's hunt, as they learned to shape better tools, as they dreamed. This is the true power of fire. Not just destruction, but connection. It turned a species into a civilization. With fire at their side, Homo erectus spread across the planet. From Africa into the Middle East, then into Asia, Indonesia, and Europe. Wherever they went, they brought flame. Campsites with layers of charcoal marked their path. Ancient fingerprints of a species that carried light into every corner of darkness. They adapted to deserts, jungles, even frozen tundra, because wherever they went, they could make warmth. And in each new land, they encountered more giants. Woolly mammoths, giant elk, cave lions, giant sloths. And each time, they learned new ways to hunt them. They used controlled burns to drive animals toward traps. They waited downwind with torches, turning fear itself into a hunting strategy. They weren't the strongest or the fastest, but they had learned how to control chaos. They had learned how to command the elements. But every weapon has a cost. As Homo erectus burned forests to hunt, ecosystems changed. Grasslands expanded, species vanished. Fire didn't just feed them, it reshaped the planet. For the first time in history, a single species was altering its environment on purpose. Some scientists believe this was the dawn of the Anthropocene, the first spark of humanity's control over nature. It began not with machines or cities, but with torches in the hands of hunters. Fire made us dominant, but it also made us dangerous. After nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus began to fade. New humans emerged: Neanderthals, Denisovans, and eventually Homo sapiens. But they all inherited one thing from their ancestor: the flame. Every hearth lit by Neanderthals, every torch carried by early humans, every candle, every engine, every city light, they all trace back to that first stolen fire in the African grasslands. Homo erectus may have vanished, but their gift never did. They were the first to look at a burning world and think, this belongs to us. Today, we live surrounded by fire, in the circuits of our machines, in the engines of our cars, in the electricity that powers the screen you're watching this on. We've forgotten what it means. But for our ancestors, fire was everything. It was warmth. It was weapon. It was home. It turned prey into predators and beasts into humans. Every spark we strike carries the memory of those first flames, the ones that lit the night for Homo erectus, the ones that taught them to stand their ground against giants. They weren't gods. They weren't even fully human. But they learned how to command the oldest force on Earth. And with it, they changed everything. Fire gave them courage. It gave them hunger. It gave them control. And from that moment on, nothing in the world could ever truly scare us again. We were born from fire, and one day, we may return to it.